So today we get to paint our painting that we did our value study and color study on last week. And so I'm going to start off with our underpainting like we always do. And I'm going to use the yellow ochre to tone my canvas and do my underpainting. So remember, I'm going to take a fan brush. I wet it with the little bit of my Gamsol, and then just put my brush into my yellow ochre to thin that out so I can go ahead and get my canvas toned. And so today I'm painting on a stretched canvas rather than a panel. So I'm also going to just tone the sides of it. Wipe all this down. Be careful and kind of brush off some of the residue left from the rag, the paper towel. And I'm using good paper towels here, so they still leave a little bit. And then so I'll just take my fan brush and kind of tone these edges a bit. Paper towel back over it again, kind of even it out. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to draw my composition, which is pretty simple. And, you know, we're going to be talking a lot about landscapes and editing because we have to do a lot of editing with a landscape. So I have decided that I'm probably going to move this tree over just a bit to get it a little bit more balanced. And then these trees are not going to be going up like this at an angle. I'm probably going to be bringing them down a bit. So just a little bit of editing when I do my underpainting. So I'm just going to go back into my yellow ochre that's thinned out. You know, we can divide up our canvas with our horizontal and vertical little notches like we always do, just to help us with deciding, knowing where our horizontal and vertical center lines are to know how to line up our composition, our drawing. And first thing I want to do is establish my horizon line. And you know, we don't want our horizon line to be in the center because then our landscape is going to be very stagnant and boring. So I'm looking at my horizon line, which is way back here, where my mountains, these background mountains and the sky meet. And so right here is going to be my horizon line. So I'm going to put it about like this, because really this painting is more about our foreground than our background. And up here, and so I'll probably, and I'm going to put this tree along here. And then continue with that horizon line here. And then we have these trees, taller trees. Right along here. And then we've got these little short trees along here right in front. So, you know, our foreground is, we actually have a little bit of middle ground trees right back here. So I'll go ahead and just designate that so we'll know where to put that color in. And then we've got our foreground is this little edge here is right along here, and then we've got some various little shrubbery and trees along here. And then all the rest of this is this foreground coming up to these trees, and then of course our middle ground and then background. So we've got all of these grasses. So pretty easy composition. So, but it's up to us to really make this landscape sing, and we do that with our color and our values. So I am going to designate where my darks are going to be. And right here is my darkest dark. So I'm just doing this again with my yellow ochre, kind of getting a little bit thicker just so I can see it. So these trees are typically the darkest part in your landscape. And there'll be some dark accents along here where these little tree foliages are, but it's not as dark as these trees in the back. So I'm going to make those darker. And again, thinking about editing, there's all of these trees here are all essentially the same shape. So if we just paint them the same shape, it's pretty boring. So as we paint, we want to keep that in mind. You know, try and get some variety. And then we'll have some darker accents down here. In our foreground. And then I'm going to wipe out where the sky is because I want to get a nice clean sky. So remember we talked last week that the sky is our lightest, it's where all of the light comes from the sun. And nothing in our landscape can be lighter than the sky. So we just want to remember that. We want to keep our sky very light. And then our next lightest, or some of our lights, are here in this foreground. So you have your sky, that's going to be pretty much our lightest lights, and then our sun is hitting the foreground, and that's where our next lightest lights are. And our trees are the darkest, and then we're really going to gray down this middle ground and our mountain in the back, or hills. These are Osage hills. Okay, so there's essentially my underpainting. So I have mixed the same colors that we did our study on last week. Got them all ready to go. I've got my greens that are going to go into the foreground. We'll also use some of these little bit darker ones for our, because we're really treating these trees as part of the foreground. So we're going to use some of this as our lightest parts of those trees, but they're not going to go this light like we have for our lights in our foreground. I also have this very dark mix. This is our darkest dark, and that will go in these trees right here where we've got our darkest dark. And I've got our middle ground tree color, which is that blued down green with white. That will go right here. Back here is a middle ground. You don't see much of it, but it's there. And I think it makes the painting a little more interesting if we establish this middle ground back here. And then in the very back is our Osage Hill, and that is this ultramarine blue with the orange and white for a grayed down blue, and that will be this hill right here. And then we also have these really pretty oranges and kind of yellowy oranges that we did with our orange, ultramarine blue, and white, our three values of that. We're going to use some of that in our foreground. And we have that accent that we made with our Viridian cadmium yellow and a lot of white. We're going to use a little bit of that. Back here as this foreground goes back, we're going to use some of these accents back here. And then we have our sky colors. So we have this, the lightest part of our sky, which is cobalt blue with a little bit of yellow ochre and a lot of white. And that we're going to put right here where it meets, goes to the horizon line and meets our hill back there. And then up further to the top where we have our ultramarine blue and cobalt and white. And this may need to go lighter. That may be a little dark, but we'll find out as we get there. So, you know, as we paint, we may have to make changes with our mixtures. That's really normal. Sometimes until we start laying our paint on the canvas, it's hard to know if we've got the right mixtures yet, but we do our best to go ahead, get them mixed up, and then if we need to make some changes along the way, then we do it. So I'm going to start with my darkest darks back here in these hills, and get my brush. Remember, at this point, we do not use our Gamsol anymore with our colors, with our paint. We just use that to thin out and make our underpainting. So now we'll start using some gel. And I really want, I'm going to keep going over this and repeating it over and over these 4 weeks. Let's not overuse our gel. There's a point where we need to stop using it because after a while it's just going to thin out these beautiful colors so much that we'll lose all of the chroma that's in them. Our gel is just when we first start laying paint on to make it creamier to go on. As we put more color on top of other color, we may need a little bit for the color to go on to the color, but once we pretty much have our canvas covered, let's stop using gel, because at that point we'll have plenty of oil on our canvas and we no longer need it. We don't need gel to make our colors pretty. We just need it to help them be a little bit creamier, not so stiff. And sometimes when you first start out, your mixture may be creamy enough that you don't even need any at all. So, but I am going to get started with it. I'm going to just take the tip of my brush, dip it into the gel, maybe wipe it like this, back and forth, and then I can scoop up my dark like this on both sides. We want more paint, a lot more paint on our brush than gel. So I'm going to start putting this in. And see, when I go back and I put my brush into that mixture, I'm not putting my brush into the gel. I'm just putting it right into my color. And I see more right back here. Again, I'm just going right to my color. I'm not using any gel. I think a lot of times I see this happening a lot with people is that putting your brush into the gel just becomes a habit and you just automatically do it. And I understand, I get it. So if we just tell our brain, let's stop and not use so much of it, so we'll know that we don't need any more gel. Just going and scrub this in. So right now I can already see all of these are the same sizes and I don't like that. So I'll be changing it with my additional passes here of color. I'm kind of rinsing out my brush a bit with the Gamsol. When you do that, really wipe off your brush with your paper towel. Get rid of that Gamsol. So now I'm going to go to these little front trees up here, and I'm going to start out with this color that we made, this dark green. I'm just going to go ahead and start with that so we have that established. So I know right now it looks very, very dark, but all of that's going to change. Rinse out my brush. And I'm going to go ahead and put in this middle ground color and our distant hill color, and then establish our lightest lights, which is our sky, and then we can go to our foreground. These are the colors that we made for this middle ground. And now I'll do this hill in the back. And right now I'm just getting color on. So all of it, you know, I can modulate a lot of this. I can get some lighter, I can get some darker. You know, I may get these middle ground trees, kind of modulate some of that. Put a little bit of, maybe make some of this lighter as it goes back. Maybe put a little bit of darker tones in the very front of it. But I want to just get our main passages of color in. Rinsing out my brush. And now I'm going to go ahead and work on this foreground. I'm going to go to a bigger brush because this is quite a bit of canvas here to cover. Pull this up just a little bit so I can work on this bottom part. And I'm going to take this really big brush first. I'm going to put a little bit of gel into the gel, just a bit. And when I'm starting with this dark mix right here, this is the same mix that we used for some of these trees back here. Again, I'm just trying to get the canvas covered. I may have to pull this up a bit. See some dark accents along here. Okay. Wipe off my brush. Plain it in some Gamsol. Get rid of the darker green. Back into my gel, and now I'm going to go into this slightly lighter green, kind of a mid-tone color. So with our, this is where our most active stroke should be in the foreground. This is where we really kind of move our brush around, our strokes around to get it more active looking. And so you can kind of even go back with some of the dark again and maybe do a horizontal, and then a vertical like that. So with especially the foreground, let's play with this, and we want to have some strokes that are, we want these vertical strokes that are taking the viewer into our painting, going up into the painting. So we might go back, Get a horizontal and then a vertical. And just really get a variety. This is grasses. So we want to get a variety of our direction of our strokes. I'm going to go back to that green, lighter green. And now I'm going to go lighter. As it's going back, it will be cooler. And as when we make our paint lighter, it's cooler because it has all of that white in it. And then I can go back. I need a little bit more of my mid-tone here. Get some more yellow. Put some of this down in the foreground. Changing my direction of my brush strokes. And maybe go lighter then up here as we're getting close to these trees. So this was the same mix, but with more white. And I'll be able to go back and forth with all of these values of color until I'm satisfied with my foreground. Back up to this light right up here. I need a little bit more white in it. And eventually we will add that accent that we made, that kind of really beautiful light blue-green accent that we made with our Viridian and a little bit of yellow ochre and our white, but I'm not going to do that yet. I'm not there yet. I don't want to do that until I feel satisfied with all of my foreground grasses here. Bring that right up. the colors that I've already laid on. Now, one thing I know that I'm going to want to do is when I do this foreground again, I will go back, remix my greens, and I want to get some more yellow in there. I think I kind of lost some of that yellow as I was adding the lights. And we really want to get more yellow. Okay, I will go back to that before I finish my painting, but now I want to move on. Want to get my sky in. And so I'm going to put in this, the lightest part of my sky, which is right here where my horizon line is. And I'm going to go back, I want this tree to move up here. I don't want it to be right level with that background hill. So I already know I'm going to be adjusting that. So I'm dragging my brush, the tip of it, over this color that I put in for my mountain back here. Sometimes I call it a mountain, sometimes I call it a hill. I guess they're Osage hills, so they're not really mountains, but I guess they're mountains for us because that's living in the plains. These are our mountains. Because that is just a transition between the sky and that mountain back there. Just a really soft, subtle transition. And again, I'll go, when I put in my second block in, I'll be able to really get that statement down. And I know that I'm going to be putting lighter on top of this very dark trees back here, so I'm going to give it a little bit of space. And now we'll go up to some of that darker sky that we made with a little bit of the ultramarine blue, and I can go just back and forth. Let's get this lighter. Have a little bit more white in there. is a clear sky. We have no clouds. Taking my brush strokes so that they're more vertical. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to these trees back here. And for these trees that are my darkest darks, I'm going to take kind of what would be a dark mix for our foreground, and I'm going to lay it on where these trees are. Just right on top. And I see, let's see, I'm gonna put some of this here. Bringing it up into where I have the sky color. Just kind of losing the edge. And again, when I put in my next block in, I'll be able to soften that out more with my sky color. Brush. I'm gonna go to these little these trees in the front. And I'm gonna put a lighter, I need some more yellow. We're gonna be using a lot of yellow, so everybody may need to end up Getting more yellow for this class. Okay. So these lights here in these front trees, these smaller trees, are lighter than these back trees, but remember, they're not going to be as light as our grass gets. This was really the mid-tone of the green that we made right here. I just kind of pulled this around this clump of trees, kind of put a little bit more of them here. I guess I'll get that a little bit lighter. Add more yellow. Get this one taller. So I'm going to go back and go into that very darkest dark that we made with our green for these trees back here. And I can get that reestablished. Pull it down. Some of this lighter mix for our front trees. And just kind of gently, I don't want to cover up all of this that I've put back in. So kind of gently move it up a bit. Then go over here. It's very dark. Pull that in. Take my brush and pull it up like this. So I'm going to kind of go back into these trees here and reestablish some of that dark. But remember, it's not as dark as the tree, as these big trees behind them. So, and I might pull this down. Kind of like that. And I can put that dark, really dark, but really just at the bottom of these trees, not cover it as much, so that they're just an accent there. So I pulled that down a bit, and I might even do it more, just so I've got a little variety of trees that are front, more back, so it's not just a straight line. Get a little bit of the dark accent right there. As you know, those grasses are kind of covering up the bottoms of these trees. So let's pull them down a bit, get something a little bit more interesting than just a straight line across. So I'm going to leave these at this point and move on, and then I can go back to them. So I'm thinking about, let's go back to these middle ground trees right back here, and I'm going to put a little bit of white in my mix. So I can get them a little bit lighter as they're going back. Now remember, our darks and lights are very compressed. Our values are compressed the further back we go. Because with the atmosphere, we don't see the variety of darks and lights like we do in our foregrounds. So we can't go we're not going to add a lot. We're not going to go through and do all the mid-tones and the lights and the variety like we do in our foreground. But I'm going to get this just slightly lighter so it is receding back more. And then I'll do the same thing with my Osage Hill back here. I'm going to get a little bit lighter in that mix, just put a little bit more white in it. Kind of just lay that on top, get a little bit more. And I'm letting my brush kind of drag over the top into where the sky is, so we have a really soft edge going into that sky. Go back to my darker mix for that background trees and kind of reestablish some of that. Back to my white. Remember, and get up and stand back to look at your painting. Okay. And I'm going to show you guys, I'm going to take a brush and knock just lightly, because as we add white, we get a lot of glare from, the light from my ceiling lights are coming down, and then it really hits, makes a lot of glare. So we haven't talked much about that, but all of this we want to kind of lightly with some vertical strokes. The light is, when it hits a horizontal, it really gets a glare. So back here we really need to get a lot of vertical strokes to knock that down. And then we have some of our oranges that we made. Remember, we've got these kind of grayed down oranges. So in grasses, there are oranges, and we want to add that. Plus, we've got a lot of green on here, so let's put throw a little bit of orange in there, because that will really add variety to our foreground. Remember, our foreground is where all of the chroma is. So I'm going to throw some of that in. I'm going to I'll go a little bit lighter there. I'm just kind of pulling up my brush, maybe do like a thing like this, horizontal. Some verticals, and just kind of all throughout, just, we don't want to go heavy with it, but we want to get it into our grasses, because it's there. And by putting a little bit of this orange in, it's really going to make this green sing, and it's going to add such a variety to our painting. And when you're doing this sort of thing, be careful about making, switching up your strokes, like this, and maybe have a grouping, so that you have one area that has a little bit more orange than another area. And then this will be a back and forth. Then I'll go back into my greens and go back in and add some of that back and forth until I feel satisfied with what I have. So this will all change as I lay in my second block in, but this will kind of get me started, and then I can go back with some green and go back and forth. I might get some lighter as we go up. These grasses up here. And then, like I said, I will go back and forth with my green again. But I just wanted to show you how I would start laying this in, and then I also would start putting some of that real pretty blue-green accent. And I think it'll be really pretty right here. So I really see a lot of it along here. Sometimes just get more horizontal strokes in and then go back over. So I'm really looking for a progression of darks and warms up to lights and cools to get that illusion of going back into our motif. Okay, this just gets me started. I will go back with a second block in, but now that I have this, then I know what I want to do to get my painting finished up.